All right, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of the Integrated Masculine series. Today we are going to talk about 1.1, learn the rules of the game. So this is still under opportunity framing. All right, one of the key parts of winning any game is to understand the rules that we're playing by, right? Understanding the rules obviously allows us to play the game, but it also gives us an advantage in that we recognize what we can and cannot control, and knowing the rules helps us to define what tools and strategies we have at our disposal. And what we'll get into next video is one important aspect of the game that we can always control, and that is our mindset. Learning the rules also allows us to question our assumptions and be able to differentiate between what are assumptions and what are actual rules. Sometimes what we assume are rules are actually just unconscious assumptions. And especially in the game of life, there's certain universal rules that apply, and that I'll kind of go into today. So there's generally some universal rules about people, there's some universal rules about the world, and there's rules or current events, which kind of dictates the rules of whatever society you're in that can affect the game that you're playing. All right, one of the big rules of nature, let's say, is this idea of feedback loops. And this is when an effect from a particular cause loops around and feeds back in as a stronger cause, which means that the cause and effect relationship kind of becomes either a positive or negative cycle, and it amplifies exponentially. And so what most people are familiar with is this normal distribution on the left side here, where you have your average and things kind of deviate pretty standard from there. Because of feedback loops, something which is very common in nature happens, and that is the power law distribution. So there's a small minority of there's a very big and disproportionate amount that's seen in a small minority of the variables. You see that also reflected in a lot of human facts, like, and it's also often known as the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle. So you'll see like at least 80% of people live in 20% of the cities, or 80% of people live in 20% of the land. At least 80% of the wealth is owned by 20% of the people. Sometimes it's even more skewed than that. It's basically the power law distribution is what graphically demonstrates inequality in all its manifestations. And it's important to know that this is a natural occurring phenomenon. It is not due to a specific kind of human hierarchical system. It naturally occurs, and trying to suppress it, especially via government intervention, would require an unbelievable amount of tyranny. What to do about that is, something that we, as a society of human beings, always need to address. But the fact that it occurs is undeniable. All right. Now, general rules of human behavior. So we recognize that people are primarily motivated by survival and reproduction. Life, there's no such thing as fair or unfair in nature. That's something we came up with as humans. It's not fair that the gazelle gets chased by the lion. It's just nature. fitness is simply defined as what continues to be able to survive and reproduce from a uh, evolutionary perspective. Dr. Jordan Peterson has this famous lobster talk, which is, this idea that hierarchies are as old as crustaceans, that they're basically unavoidable, and that the serotonin system tracks this hierarchy. So, again, hierarchies are unavoidable and necessary, but they do create inequality, and that's something that we have to address as a species. But while it's unavoidable that we judge ourselves based on this serotonin system, we can also have some conscious control over how we base those comparisons. So in the natural world, let's say it's based on a combination of competence, like physical ability, intelligence, all that stuff. But sometimes we conflate that with comparisons like who has more money, who has a nicer car, who's been to more countries, things like that, which, is not, those aren't necessarily evolutionarily based comparisons. Those are like societal or socially indoctrinated comparisons that we can be aware that we may be making. From economics, we learn and understand that we can understand a lot of human behavior based on incentives, because people act in self-interest. So when people are acting a certain way, you can kind of try to understand them based on why the incentives that are causing them to act that way. And lastly, people kind of tend to be myopic and care more about the present than the future. This is, again, depends very much on personality and cultural conditioning. People generally default to the laziest route, and as a side note, the ability to delay gratification is a huge indicator for the potential to succeed. Some other important facts: this kind of falls into alignment with some of the divine consciousness things we talked about in the first part of this series, just that the world, everything's connected, but we humans have a tendency to think of ourselves as separate, thanks to what we would call our ego. And when we're in that space, we're fearful, we're obsessed with survival, and we're focused on external things such as social status. Because everything's intertwined, how we do something affects how we do everything, and any leaks, let's say, in the various games, the various aspects of life can affect all aspects of our life. And so we want to bring everything together, and we do that through our underlying or overarching values, mission, and intent purpose, which we'll get into. And having that general foundation for what we value, who we see ourselves as, what is our purpose here, what is our general life mission, allows us to craft a more purposeful path forward. Things decay. It's the natural law of entropy, and so it takes effort just to remain in the same place. It takes effort just to stay alive. It takes effort just to maintain where you are, and so we gotta work. That's it. This last little graph, I know it might be hard to see, but it's three graphs overlaid together. So we have the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is, people's confidence tends to be highest when they're incompetent, and then once they start learning, they realize how little they know until they achieve mastery. It's true with Tim Ferriss's language acquisition and product market fit. So in the beginning, we have kind of a medium level of enthusiasm. Then it rises very quickly because we get super excited about certain things. Then we hit that trough of sorrow, where reality sets in, and kind of hit that valley of disappointment where things aren't as easy as we thought it would be. But if you keep pushing, eventually the light at the end of the tunnel will come out, and you'll make it. So if you're in that little dark place, just keep on going, and you'll make it out eventually. Sometimes when it seems like we're failing, we're really just in the middle of succeeding, and succeeding is not just a straight line. It's can be a winding, curving path, but don't give up, and you'll make it through. That's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. Oh wait, there's more. A note on breaking rules. All right, so there's obviously certain universal rules, and kind of as I mentioned, it's important to have an awareness of what the rules are, what are actual rules, what are our assumptions, and what are rules that are flexible, that we can potentially break, that might seem like rules but aren't actually strictly defined rules. So in general, society's laws and ways of being help keep peace, maintain stability, give structure, reflect group values, can make things easier because it limits context. You don't have to think as much. But there are some times when the rules become outdated and they're actually counterproductive to their original intent. And this is why the well-developed individual is the antidote to the potential aspects of tyranny, the potential tyrannical aspects of society and biology, because sometimes the rules of biology no longer fit the times. But if we just blindly continue to follow them, then they're outdated and they no longer serve us. So it's important to actually take time to reflect and update the ancient wisdom if necessary, and to align with the spirit of the rules rather than the rules themselves. So it's important that we don't just blindly follow the status quo, that we think critically, and that we have the courage to take an alternate path when necessary. This is this is where values really come into play, and self-awareness, because sometimes people just want to be rebels and they just want to go against established rules just for the sake of it, just to justify their own laziness, their own wrongdoing, whatever it is. It's very important that we are moored in our ethics and challenge the rules only when we genuinely believe that they are no longer serving their original intent. And that process is something that each and every one of us will continue to refine our entire lives as we continue to gain more wisdom, more experience. We'll know what are the rules we can and should follow, and what are the rules we might need to break for us to live, authentic, courageous, and truthful and honorable lives. That is the end of this video. Hope you got something out of it. I will see you in the next one.